You start on mute, Alex. Hello.
Oh, thank you.
There you
It's a rookie mistake. How is everybody doing? It's a pleasure to be here on the third episode of Purpose Podcast. Juan, thank you for being here. And Ananda, what a joy, what a pleasure to be able
It's,
to have this conversation with you.
the pleasure is all mine. I'm so happy to be here with you.
So today's a very interesting episode. I think one of the most interesting we'll be able to see, not only because we've been blessed by Ananda accepting this invitation, but also because it's very unique, the way Ananda sees the world according to what she herself has lived, and that makes it very very congruent. So hello, today from Mexico City and from New York City. We are transmitting live. If you're able to see us live, that would be great. Otherwise, this will remain in LinkedIn, the recording, so you can check on it afterwards. So welcome to episode 3. And Ananda, tell us where you are, what brings you here, and why would you be in a conversation about purpose?
Okay. Well, first of all, I'm so happy to be here with both of you. I can't tell you how much my wife and I miss Mexico City. We miss it so much. We love it so much. I mean, we feel like it's a second home for us. So it's so nice to be connected with you, long distance. I'm in New York City. So long
But
distance.
the hearts are together.
Sorry?
The hearts are together.
The hearts are together. The hearts are together virtually, which is sort of the name of the game in COVID times, right?
Definitely. Yes. We need to increase our connection by other means, right? I mean, we have technology, but we need to share purposes. And that's one of the reasons that why we have you here, right? What is the reason why you would talk about purpose? How are you connected to purpose? What is your purpose in life?
I mean, my purpose in life is to help other people. That's my purpose in life. I was thinking a lot about how I would describe my purpose, the journey, how I got to my purpose, because it wasn't a straight route to finding my purpose. And in my exploration and thinking about what we were going to talk about today was the difference between having a skill set and whether or not that skill set can align with your purpose.
And how does that, because that's very interesting, because sometimes, we're either born or we develop skills, and then suddenly we find out that what we're doing or that what we're good doing doesn't fulfill anything other than just like doing a job or getting paid. How do you think people should meet what they're good for versus what they like doing versus what they want to be or do?
So that's a really good question, Juan, and one that I have actually thought a lot about. So I'm going to start first by briefly talking about my personal journey.
Great.
So it was very clear early on that the skill most apparent to me was the skill to be an opera singer. That was the skill most apparent to me. And I did my undergraduate work. I did my master's work. I went to a special high school to focus on becoming an opera singer, but it was never what I loved. And I think for many people out there, their skill set might not be reflective of what they love. Now, to me, the issue becomes when we are adults and we have a skill set that might not reflect what we love. The challenge is, how can we look at what we love and apply our skill set to it? Or if financially we have to make a certain amount of income, our skill set supports our ability to make the income that we need to make to support ourselves, our loved ones. How do we find a sense of purpose within those constraints? Because I feel when I'm coaching women, there's this saying, and it's a saying, I don't know if it's just a United States saying, but it's don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's not all or nothing. How do we find a middle road? How do we do what we need to do financially, use the skill set, say we're good with numbers. Like my wife is really good with numbers. Like that's a skill for her. It's not a skill of mine. I'm not really great with I'm not really great with numbers, but to have that skill, being good with numbers, can kind of dictate what your career looks like.
That change, Ananda, because most people who find that sort of, let's call it epiphany, when you're in the middle of your life or at some point in your life and you realize, I'm good at what I'm doing, but it's not what I like. So either I fund what I like through what I know how to do, or I throw the baby away with the whole bathtub. Do you think people, or from your experience, and especially experience with women, is it normally a painful tipping point that brings that, or does it come naturally to people? Because most people find this very late in time. So what triggers that need for purpose?
Yeah, I mean, I would. So before I say what I'm going to say, Juan, how old are you? Can you tell me that live?
Yes, I'm 48 years old.
So we're the same age. So
well, you look much better than I do.
Thank you. But it's sort of I'm asking you because you referenced it a little bit. Like, is there a point in your life, sort of a second phase, where you're like, can I swear on this, or there's no swearing? Swearing, where you're like, oh shit, like I'm exhausted, but I know that I need to, make X amount of dollars, or whatever it is. Like, I know, what am I going to do? And for some people, that's a welcome awakening. And for other people, it's devastating. Because maybe they've made the choice up until this point in their lives out of fear. So you have to sort of break down, or I need to break down with my clients why they're making the choices they're making. And can we make some of the choices that they're making work? Or do we need to erase the chalkboard and write something new?
It's so interesting. I believe that finding purpose, it's a bit like nurturing the soil in which something is going to grow, right? I mean, nothing is going to grow if the soil is not fertile, right? You need to work with it. You need to develop the soil, and that works for our minds, that works for our soul, it works for our lives in general. So how do you nurture something even though you don't know the purpose? Because maybe the purpose is not available to you yet, but if you're doing the right things, if you're doing the right practices, maybe you can find a purpose, right? I don't know if you've encountered that in your work. I mean, sometimes people think that they need to strive towards a purpose without changing before, right? And I believe that when you start developing your, even good habits, right? If you start developing your mind, your body, sometimes purpose reveals itself. How do you go about that? How do you find your life's purpose?
If we are functioning under the assumption that our ultimate goal is to find our life's purpose, the place to begin is self-reflection, and healing. I would say that if one is in their 40s and they are unsure about how and where they find joy in their present life, I would suggest that we go all the way back into childhood and see what brought them joy, but also see if there's any history. I work particularly with women who have had some type of trauma. They don't always come to me because of trauma. They come to me because they're having an issue with something else in their adulthood. But what we find in our journey in the present day is that we have to look back and we have to see what happened and how it affected us. And that is an inevitable process in really finding your heartfelt and heart-centered purpose. We have to look back.
You mentioned something that I think was very powerful in your previous answer, and that was that a lot of people do not get to the place because of fear. There's this element of fear.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say it's fear of happiness, fear of change, or fear of external social factors that force you into a certain lifestyle or a standard type of living? What would you think are the main fears that people experiment today that end up being a sort of a wall that does not allow them to be happy and to fulfill their lives? What do those fears look like, and where are they originated?
I don't think there is one fear. I mean, I do think it's very individual, but I think it is stems from lack of acceptance of self and fear of external judgment. Like if I were to sort of boil it down, lack of acceptance of self and desires, and external, also internal fear of judgment. We judge ourselves, right? It's hard to let go of a pattern or a way of living that we want or need to shift.
And how do you, how painful, because that journey is painful. It leads to happiness at the end or fulfillment.
Mm-hmm.
But all of us are adverse to pain. Nobody wants pain. How do you address that shift that is painful, moving out of things that do not nurture you? And how can people really understand that just living through that pain will take them to a better place when we all want to avoid pain?
It's funny. I was in conversation with a client this week who is struggling with setting boundaries with people in their lives. So, you know what setting boundaries means? Okay, so it's like, it requires confrontation. It requires saying, you know what, this behavior is really not comfortable for me. I need to let you know that I'm not going to accept this behavior anymore. And she was feeling very uncomfortable about it because this particular person in her life had become very cold. And I said to her, I was like, well, were you uncomfortable before you set the boundary? Was it painful before you set the boundary? And she said, yes. And I said, well, doing the uncomfortable thing that was better for you and healthier for you in the end is what is going to yield you the brighter future. You've been true to yourself. Allowing this person to walk all over her before, as uncomfortable and upsetting as it was, she was losing herself in the process. So really it's about healing and getting back to yourself. And I do, and it's funny because I am and my wife will tell you, I am a very emotional person. But when it comes to coaching and working with clients, I really like to have this conversation intellectually because the emotions are going to be there. So how do we sort of separate ourselves and really look at this healing process and this moving forward process and this wanting a brighter future and finding your purpose process? How can we do this step by step? How can we do this intellectually and remove the extreme emotional response to it?
It's so interesting. We have a perspective in life in which we can rely. I mean, it comes from our past. We can rely on our past, or we can decide to change it. We can live by our past, or we can heal, recover our dignity, as Juan always says. And then after we've recovered our dignity, after we have healed our past trauma or perspective of life, then we can strive towards purpose. But as I gather from what you say, we cannot do it before, right? And that is very important. That is something we haven't discussed on the previous episodes. We need to go step by step. I mean, maybe the purpose in life right now is just to heal my life. And then after I've healed, then I can go towards a more transcendent purpose. But I think that sometimes people confuse developing a purpose with something that needs to benefit all humankind. It needs to be a legend. I mean, it needs to be huge. But sometimes purpose is just about going through the day, being conscious, being more aware, and healing just this moment. How do we do it? What's a better way of doing it, and how do you think that people in general, but women in particular, how can they recover their sense of worth and their strength so that they can live a more fulfilling life?
I think the very first thing that we need to do, and I'll say we because I'm not talking about this topic from a pulpit, so to speak. I have been there. I have done the work. I continue to do the work. So the very first question is while we are here together and people are watching, whoever's watching or whoever might watch later, take a piece of paper and write down what is not working in your life. This is very practical. This is not I think what I want to let people know, this is not a huge sort of ambiguous process. The healing can be distilled and focused. So you write down what is not working in your life, what relationships are not working that you would like to work better, what is not working in your career, and what would you like to be better in your career? What types of relationships do you want with your colleagues? in your next job if you happen to have left your job? What do you want your work hours to be like? What do you want your daily life to like? In your most intimate relationships with your partner, how much time do you need to spend together to have that feel fulfilling? How much time with your children do you need to spend with them to feel like your relationship is fulfilling and it feels connected? You write down what your ultimate goals are and then work backward. Because once you write your ultimate goals down, it can give you a framework as to how to get there. So it doesn't feel, and part of that, Juan, to answer your question before, that process can start to take this sting out of fear, because you're like, oh shit, like I have stuff I can do. Like this is not completely out of my control.
Where do you find, what I think the description is fabulous and the method is clearly practical. What I would, if I would be confronted with that reality of a written paper on what I need to do and what's not allowing me to do that, and I would be able to understand my fears. Where are we able to get courage to do it? Because it's a leap of faith in many ways, and sometimes it's broken. It takes breaking down a lot of stuff and putting a lot of stuff on fire. Where does that, how do we build the courage to do it? When we understand it, when we have it clear, when we understand our fears and we understand what we want, where does the courage come from to be able to do it? The strength, the heartbeat that will pull you into action.
Courage, the experience of courage is an action. It's not the process of waiting for courage to arrive.
Would you describe that action?
Yes, the way that, sorry, Juan, sometimes I take deep pauses in my, I do it all the time. I'm on the phone with my friends and I take a deep pause. They're like, are you there?
Are you still there? Okay, we won't interrupt you.
No, worries. I don't mind.
Take those pauses.
Okay, I'm going to share a little anecdote and tell you or explain to you how this works and why I know it works. In my late 20s, I weighed over 200 pounds. So I don't know if you knew that, Juan. Did you know that? So I weighed 207 pounds. I was very depressed. I was having trouble leaving my apartment. I was living in New York City at the time. And I had a mentor. I'll just call her, I had a female mentor. And I was one of those people, she would make a suggestion, like, can you just practice leaving your apartment today for 10 minutes? And I would say to her, but I'm afraid. I don't want to go outside. I'm afraid. I don't have enough courage to leave my apartment, not even for 10 minutes. And she said, leave your apartment and see what happens. And I left my apartment, even though I was afraid, and even though I had zero experience with courage. And I left my apartment and nothing bad happened. And with that one first baby step, I felt less afraid. And with that one first baby step, I was able to say to myself, I can do this again. So I had to prove to myself that I could do it. And that is how you gain courage. It's by taking the action with at least one person of support, at least one person who has your back. And the more action that you take, the more courage you feel.
It's interesting. There's science behind that. I mean, motivation, intrinsic motivation is not eternal. We need to. It's like an engine. We need to put fuel in it, right? And fuel is action, and every single action provokes, movement, and that movement feels like accomplishment, and accomplishment feels like I am worth something, and if I'm worth something, then I can keep doing it, right? It's this cycle, and it's interesting. I think that in the end, it's nothing. It's nothing that's out of reach in a way, right? I mean, we can all do it, and most people don't have access to coaches or mentors or professional help, but we all have the ability to act, to do things, to go out, right? How can we do it if we don't have access to professional help?
So if you don't have access to professional help, but you have a best friend or you have a partner, you just need one person in your life that you trust emotionally, and you're able to say, I need to change my career. I'm terrified. I'm afraid I won't be successful. In the change that I make, but I'm going to take this one action first to make this change. Will you be there for me? After I take this one action, can I call you and tell you how it went? Will you be there for me? Will you listen to me? If I'm upset, can you be present for me? It just takes one person. And it doesn't have to be someone you have to pay.
That's very, very powerful. Because sometimes we all feel that solutions are very, very far away from us, and they most of them are even closer. Well, most of them are inside us, but the help is closer than we think. Let me shift gears, Ananda, for a moment. And there's something that two things that I'm very curious about when studying what you have written and your webpage. And it's two questions. Number one is, in your career or in your practice, it's why are you so emphatic about my work is about women? That's kind of the first part of the question. And the second one is also from your experience, what is significantly different that work around women has to be specialized or is different than work around men when we're all humans? What's that? Why women, and what's different about it? What's in these things around purpose, fears, people that they have your back, courage. So it's like a double-headed question.
No, I mean, it's a very good question. And, when I started my practice, it wasn't solely for women. I think part of it is in coaching, we are encouraged to have a niche. So for me, in that, I feel like I understand women, maybe. I personally, being a woman, I think I understand the nature of women more than I do men, and some of the more intimate topics for women. So I work a lot with women in terms of finding love. So dating, I have clients who are online dating, and their own relationships with their partners, and their relationships with themselves. I think as a woman, I understand that more, having been in their shoes. So I picked working with women as my niche because of that. Yeah. So it wasn't, yeah, I guess I felt like I could be of the most help in that way.
Being very binary, and life is not binary, is there a difference around purpose or the difficulties women have vis-a-vis the difficulties men have?
No, I actually don't think so, because I believe that in family units, both partners, and I won't even say in heterosexual relationships. So two partners can both have careers, can both struggle with their purpose in their careers. So yeah, so I don't think it is specific to men or women.
Interesting. Yes. Yeah. Go ahead.
I also will add to that looking back into our histories, like I spoke about in the beginning of the podcast, that looking back at points of trauma, so whether it's parental abandonment when we were children, abuse when we were children, bullying in school when we were children, whatever those points are in which we have to set our heart aside to survive, whatever gender we are, we go back and we take a sensitive look and heal those parts of ourselves to be more the purpose. And back to your what you were saying before, Juan, about being uncomfortable. We get comfortable being uncomfortable because our primary purpose to live the life we want is more attractive, is more desirable to us. We are fueled by our ultimate goal. And for that, we are willing to be uncomfortable.
It seems that when we are more in contact with our hearts, then we are closer to finding our purpose or living living in our purpose and developing our purpose day to day. But also we are constrained by not only the past, but by the context in which we live, right? Sometimes it's not a traumatic experience in childhood, but maybe we're not available. I mean, a broader perspective is not available to us, so that we think that we are living our purpose when in reality we're living somebody else's, right? Which happens a lot. I mean, we live the purpose of our employer or our partner or whatever. I mean, we're not actually fulfilling our life's purpose. So how do you distinguish between someone that is constrained by their traumatic experiences in childhood or whatever time in their lives, or someone that is constrained by the present, by their context, and maybe it's a comfort zone. I don't know, but how do you go about determining which of the two, or maybe there's a third or fourth constraint that you see?
I think going back to putting pen to paper, or blank pages document or Word document, and examining based on what you asked me, there is something in your life that doesn't feel right. That's the basis of this exploration, right?
Okay.
So you have to write it down. You have to write it down and see what it is and possibly why it is. And that will be your guide. That will be your guide. And even that action of putting pen to paper is taking everything that's out here and distilling to get back into here. Because that feeling of unhappiness, that feeling that you're not living your life's purpose for whatever reason, or you're not feeling passionate about something in your life for whatever reason, it's this kind of energy, right? It's that sort of chaotic, swirling. But once you put it down, see it. I think that's what I'm really trying to emphasize. See it in front of you on paper. And that act in and of itself is your own ability to start to shed all the bullshit, for lack of a better way of saying it. And I also did want to say that there is no ultimate. So there is no, when I'm working with clients, I have zero interest in having them feel like you need to have healed your abuse of the past in order to have a better present right now. Forget the future, but just a better present right now. I think everything runs in tandem. This is not about perfection. It's just about willingness.
And that implies there's no end state either.
Exactly. There's no end state. And and one of the things I was really thinking about, because I sometimes get afraid when I hear words like purpose or passion, because of what you just talked about. What about constraints? What if there are realistic constraints that you cannot get around? So I wanted to speak to that, because I think that the answer from what I see in my practice is finding something within those constraints that is a positive experience for you. Maybe within the constraints that you have, you can be a role model to a colleague. You know what I mean? There are ways in which you can find purpose within constraints. Remember that it's not all or nothing. That's a lot of pressure, and unnecessary pressure, if you are living within certain constraints.
Anandah, why is this? Sorry, Alex, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, do it.
Why? I wonder. This discussion was not on the table even 10 years ago. So I just want to change the vantage point from, because we've been talking about individuals. Why do you think the issues around women, around race, around dignity, around abuse, around violence, around emotional safety are the issues of today, but were not, even though they were there, were not the issues that people worked around 10 years ago? What is that turning point that made these things today so relevant that we did not see 10 years ago, as close as 10 years ago? This is a discussion that comes in the past 5 years, basically.
I think that in general, societally, we've gotten more comfortable talking about, or I should say, we've gotten more comfortable with everything not being okay and talking about it. And it's really quite amazing and wonderful and necessary. I think a lot of that is discussion, a deeper discussion that we've been having over the past 5 years about mental health and why depression and anxiety have persisted, but also that it's okay. It's okay to be anxious. It's okay to be depressed. Here's where you can get help. And I say, okay, but it's like, it's okay to see it. It's okay to recognize it within yourself to get the help that you need and essential. I think that the more of us who have experienced mental health issues, have experienced a loved one with mental health issues or addiction, the more that we are willing to be okay with things not just looking good and being pretty, we talk about it. And it breaks a barrier. We begin to accept ourselves as human and our loved ones as human.
We definitely need to sustain the discomfort of difficult conversations, right? Of mental health and how most of us will go through a period of life in which we don't have it all together, right? I mean, when we are too depressed to be able to work or too anxious to be able to create a new enterprise, right? I mean, we're all human. We suffer from the same, maybe not exactly the same thing, but we feel the world in similar ways, right? We experience life in similar ways, and I think that as we've developed through this episode, we can see that there are levels of purpose, and as I said before, also maybe the purpose in your life right now is just to go back to yourself, just to heal yourself, and just to be able to I don't know, recover something that you lost in the past. But then what about when we are ready, when we are healed, when we can say that our traumatic experience has passed and we have this sense of being able to ignite that passion again? What about that transcendent purpose? What about that moment in life when you feel that you are in the place that you ought to be, when you are in the situation where you can change your context and you can become a creator and not just a consumer, right? When you can become an author instead of just a reader, right? So when you're in that point in life, when you can throw seeds to this throw seeds away and watch them grow, what do you think that we should put our attention into? What are the pressing issues of our society today that need that transcendence, that force, that energy, that passion, so that we can really change the world for the better?
It's interesting because I'm taking in your question because it's very vast. And I believe that big changes start with your nucleus. When it comes to you having a greater effect on the world as a whole, if that's what you desire, it starts first with you and your attention to the human beings closest to you, your friends, your family. That's where it begins. It begins that is your nucleus. That is your heart center that is closest to your actual heart. And when you are nurturing and developing your own nucleus, that is when you will know how to make a greater change in the world around you, if that's what you desire.
That's a very pragmatic approach. So it's like eat the elephant by pieces and start with the pieces around you. Let me ask you one, I guess, final question from my part before we close. We've missed one word in this whole conversation, which is a word that is constant in your writing and in your thoughts. And let me get very Tina Turner. What's love got to do with all this?
Everything. So don't make me break out into song. I'm about to pull some Tina out.
Well, you are an opera singer. It should sound well.
Watch the documentary, by the way, if you haven't watched the Tina Turner documentary. It's very good. But healing yourself to be closer to yourself and the people who you love is all about love. As a coach, I firmly believe, whether it's improving your love relationship with your significant other, improving your love with your family members and your friends, that starts with you. I'm going to say this one sentence. Let it begin with you. That level of extension of love and caring and respect from your heart to the people closest to you is one of the most incredible, transformative experiences you will ever have. And it will open the door in your own personal life for whatever is meant to come in. Do right by you and do right by the people that you love.
Amazing, amazing. And then when you've connected with love, when you've connected with that soothing love that, you know, that is going back to yourself. You know, it's like that soothing sensation that heals trauma and that puts you in the right place to change things around you, close to you, right? When you're there, when you're in that connection, how can you share it more deeply, and not only with your actions? Is there a way in which we can help others, even if we're not professional coaches or therapists or anything? How can we deliver that soothing effect of love to others so that they can also get closer to their purpose?
No, that's a good question, and it takes me back to a few months ago in January, and one of the things that we touched on a little bit in the beginning of the podcast today is the desire for deeper connection. And I took my account is still open, but I stopped using my Instagram. And I'm not on Facebook, but I stopped, and this is not a commentary on social media at all. I think that, it serves a purpose. And if it's enriching for you, then, by all means. But something clicked inside of me. And part of it, I think, is my age. I didn't grow up in the age of social media. I didn't grow up in the age of cell phones, even. The only way you could really reach out to someone that you loved was by getting in your car or picking up the phone to make a phone call. And I stopped using social media because I realized for myself, and also in observation, that we see that experience as connection. Like the time that we take to browse or like or comment. And I was like, what if we when we knew we wanted to connect with someone, we had no idea what was going on in their lives because we weren't on social media. We had to pick up the phone or make a date to meet, to really connect and be there. So Alex, it goes back to what we talked about maybe half an hour ago. What if you don't have money for a coach? What if you don't have money for a therapist? What you do have is what you can give someone you love, which is a phone call. I have one friend I don't text with at all. So I call her and I say, we call each other, and I ask her, how are you doing? What's going on? How can I be there for you? I was looking for a way to sort of get back to the way things used to be, when we really had to literally reach out to show our love, to show our care, to ask, how can I be there for you? And that is real heart, intimate connection. And I think it's an intimacy, whether we realize it or not, especially during the pandemic, that we have all craved. That heart, straight heart to heart.
That's a fabulous, it's amazing what you just said. And I'm going to, I think it's a real good suggestion. I'm going to find a friend, and I think we will promise ourselves that we will not text, that we will only call ourselves, because sometimes people need a call. Sometimes you get even surprised that the phone rings.
I know, right?
Now we don't even call to the extent we send voice messages and answer through voice messages. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to get a friend and agree that we will not text each other, but we can only talk to each other or see each other. I think that adds a lot of connection. Anandah, we're hitting the top of the hour.
Oh my gosh, that went so fast.
Yeah, this has been very enriching. This has been a very unique approach to what we've done before. Any closing thing that you want people to have in their mind before we close?
Trust who you are. Listen to your heart. And don't think about it. Just do it. Just do it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your inspiration. How do people reach out to you, Anandah?
Oh, okay. So that's a really good question. My email is the place to start. Yes, and then we can connect that way and further a conversation.
So we'll add it in the post, your email, and then people can start from there.
Perfect.
Anandah, thank you very much. This is our episode 3. I think a heartwarming episode, and an episode with a lot of internal depth versus, you know, it's like an inside out approach versus an outside in that we've worked a lot around. And this adds a lot of diversity to our conversation. Thank you for my part. Thank you, Alex. And as always, I am a firm believer that every day, the best is yet to come.
Yes.
Thank you, Anandah.
Thank you,
everybody.
Alex. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Juan, so much. Have a great
Hope
weekend.
to see you soon. You too. Thank you to everybody that was connected, and see you on the next episode. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.